Good morning, everybody. It's Dr. Bill Williams on the Influencer Podcast. I am so pleased you're here today, joining us in the audience all around the world, coming from 190 countries. Many people live, and many more will watch it in the recorded version. So today we've got a special guest, Robert Gilbreath, a fractional executive. What in the heck is a fractional executive? Well, he's going to tell us about it. Robert, you came on just at the right time because I was kind of stumbling around going, what's a fractional executive? In Austin, Texas, what do they do with you? What do you do with the people you work with?
Hey, Dr. Bill, thanks for having me on. Hello, everybody who's listening live and who might be watching this after the fact. I'm only laughing at that intro because, I think fractional executive has become a more maybe modern day version or modern day nomenclature, right? For a consultant, maybe someone who comes in and is as a more of a mercenary around a certain problem or set of problems that a company is having. What my understanding of it a little bit is that if you think of about like private equity or investment groups, they typically would install for a temporary period of time, would install an executive, maybe on a company they acquired or a company they're trying to turn around. They would call that a fractional because that person might be installed at 2 or 3 of their portfolio companies. That's now sort of blended its way out into more of the free market, if you will. And so it, as the name implies, it's for most of my clients, I'm acting as if I am a C-level employee. For some of them, it's a CMO position. Some it's a product officer, partnerships. But I'm not necessarily full-time anywhere. But I'm giving them the impact of basically a full-time executive in a situation that's much more economical and typically faster to fruition than if they try to do a full-on hiring and recruitment process.
I guess they bring you in above a consultant level because they figure they can't get rid of you as easy. If you're a fractional executive, you're a little more powerful, you have a little more sway, and they have to do what you tell them.
Yeah, knock on wood. Yeah, knock on wood. I've been doing this for my full-time business since earlier this year, and I am proud to say a majority of my clients I've had for a while through this time. I have already cycled through a few, some by design and some by sort of, I know you talk a lot about what value businesses bring to their users, and like from a case of me and being a consultant, I really want to bring a high level of value. So I might be overly honest with some of my clients if I can't provide that value. Whether it's in this early stages or later, I try to be very, very honest with the value I'm providing, and I want to provide a very high value to your point, so that they feel like they can't move on, and I continue to provide that value.
Yeah, I think it's like the height of the coaching level. It's when people get to that point where they're wise and their value is well known in the industry, then they get kind of farmed out at the point of their choice. It's a choice thing. You get to choose to be a fractional executive because you've already proven yourself capable in the industry. So I can recognize where you are, and let's let our audience kind of get a picture of your background. Kind of give us a quick run through of what happened and how'd you get to this place?
Yeah, that's
your career path.
Yeah, we've all seen the meme or the picture of people think that success is just up and to the right arrow where everything's fairly linear and planned out, and then the juxtaposed to that is the spaghetti bowl of whatever. Yeah, and I'd say that in an A versus B situation, that is truth, right? For most people, that is truth to some degree. Maybe even if it's micro levels, right? So maybe it looks kind of straight, but there's still some zigzags in there if you zoom in. I'd say for mine, it's spaghetti, and then maybe a little bit of a straight edge, because even though I've taken a lot of paths through the years, it's usually with a bigger vision. For me, I always knew I wanted to have my own business, consultancy, my own thing. I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family, always around small businesses, very small teams, very efficient little teams. And I'd say more recently, I spent about the past decade in leadership with a company called ShipStation, which is a online, mostly serving online retailers, but shipping, logistics, order management. I'm not a shipping guy, but I was a retailer, and I've dealt with a lot of those problems as an early online retailer. Spent about a decade in that family of companies, and a little bit of an interesting trajectory there. Joined as maybe the 9th or 10th employee, original CMO of the company, handled all the marketing, PR, communications, partnerships, a lot of biz dev work on the partnership side. We were bootstrapped, very bootstrapped, and no investment whatsoever. That turned into getting acquired by a publicly traded company. So I sort of had same brand and family, different ownership structure, lived in that world for a very long time. I left for a little bit and did some other more VC fueled, kind of crazy VC fueled startup things. And then actually rejoined the whole ShipStation. Octane is now the holding company, but they had been taken private. And for me, it was an interesting, some people say that I'm a masochistic bucket list guy when it comes to my career. And what that means is I really have this sort of had this mantra throughout my career of trying different versions of what I'm doing. And sometimes from like a marketing executive, that means that I've jumped to different styles of like the trade show aisle, if you will, software side or retail side, or back in the early days, actually physical product sales versus digital downloads and those things. I rejoined my company under PE ownership and experienced all that that it can be and what people hear about it, in good and bad. And I always knew that once I was done with that time back at my old company, my plan was to then go out. And to your point, you talked about sort of this experience that people have and the relationships that people have. I knew that I could be very useful for other folks, really old versions of myself, if you will. There's so many companies, like even in just the SaaS e-commerce ecosystem, so many people that need help. They're trying to figure out how to go to market. We could do a whole other podcast around like the effects of COVID from a business standpoint, and the before, the ramp, the flat, and now this dip that is almost kind of back to normal for businesses, but so many businesses didn't really know what to do during those stages. And so that's where I am today. I personally sort of have this mission, kind of growing up in small business world. I have this mission. My personal mission is to help as many businesses as possible. And the way that I've manifested that is if I'm helping, let's say, example, a lot of my clients are in e-commerce SaaS, they're servicing small businesses that are online sellers. If I can help those companies be better at serving all those retailers, all those merchants, I'm fulfilling my mission of helping as many small businesses as I can. And so that's where it gets me today.
That's a good career path. I really enjoy seeing the rise through your corporate work, and then you kind of went back and you stumble back into the same thing. Give us one failure story that led you to leave corporate work for others and become your own boss.
That I wish I had just one story. I love that you queued that up as a corporate related, because I did. I worked for two of the largest companies in America out of college. I worked for Ford Motor Company and then Wells Fargo Bank. And I would say I've had a similar almost failure story at both of those. And it's around not being patient and not giving things the time to come to fruition. And probably also just being a little bit scared with expressing that impatience and how that impatience was expressed. And so I think if I take it and I take that through my whole career, there has been times where me being impatient was a problem and maybe caused me to be a little rash with decisions. And I've definitely through the years, each time those kind of situations have come up, I've been less rash and more patient and understand there's a bigger picture than what's going on. So I think it's more of an overarching lesson of patience, which I think you're going to hear me say patience a lot in our interview.
Well, you sat at the top of the heap and looked down upon these companies that you're the fractional CEO, right? You're the fractional CMO. What are they doing that's failing, and how do you rescue them by giving them good advice? What is the things that they are doing?
Yeah, one thing I see, and this is not necessarily, it's not universal, but if I look at companies that are succeeding that I work with or that I've had partnership with, or I've studied through the years, and ones again, flip side, studied or worked with, there's this misconception that if I go and look at the winner, if maybe I'm judging some other company as a winner in the space, or they're beating me at the space, there's this assumption that if I copy some of what they're doing, that I'm going to also win, right? And there's this assumption that because they appear to be winning, they're smarter than me, or they're doing something better than me. And I've seen companies literally, I can't say who the two are. They aren't clients of mine today, but they're companies I've worked with through the years. I'd go sit with executives at one, and they wanted to talk about their competition and why and what their competition was doing. The other one, I'd never heard a word about competition. They talked about their clients and their merchants, and from a partner perspective, how do we work together? And so, yeah, I think part of it is like, instead of just thinking of what your own business is, who your own customers are, and what you need to do to be better and great for them, is a little bit too much of looking outside, say from like an individual contributor level in a career, someone that's inside of one of these orgs, is understanding. Bill, there's a saying I have that's a little bit of bastardization of other sayings, but it's just people need to understand sort of the ecosystem of their actions, right? And it's your personal actions towards other people around you, but it's also from a business standpoint and really understanding. It's hardly ever like if I flip this lever, it's hardly ever as binary and linear as it sounds, right? And so people that I've seen through the years that have done well versus not as well, to me, they have a better understanding of, like I said, the ecosystem of their actions, whether a department or for their clientele or their partners. Those are the people that really I see them succeed more than not.
I like the analogy, the work on yourself, work on your company more than you try to emulate what other people are doing on the outside, because you don't know what they're doing on their insides.
No, right. You assume you assume, I was a very early online retailer, and I think this is the only time where I would flip my advice around. As an early online retailer, we would watch what Amazon was doing as an online retailer, because we knew they had more resources, we knew they had more traffic, we knew they had more data. And so the joke, and this wasn't just in my past company, it was across many, sort of the ecosystem of friends and family, if you will, around retail. The joke would always be, well, if Amazon's do it, it's probably the right thing to do, right? So you would maybe have a few people you look at and say, oh, they're doing something smart. I think we're in a different time now, and there's table stakes of things you have to do, but the best companies are the ones that are going to just kind of worry about themselves and worry about their users, and then that's where the success happens.
I like it. That's a pretty good advice. Tell me what motivates you internally to keep going at this stage in your life.
I get a kick out of helping people. So I want to provide value. I want to be a good parent. I have kids. I have small kids, and they're of the age where they can understand what I work on. I want them to see what I'm doing. I want them to understand, that I'm helping these other businesses. I also just get a kick out of, like, in cases where I'm more so acting as a fractional CMO, and then have a team of people that maybe I'm mentoring and helping, seeing those folks, apply what I'm trying to teach them, get to that next phase. That totally motivates me. Back when I was more building teams, and I would be at a company maybe that was small budgeted and needed to use, let's say we would use interns to grow out a marketing department. Something that always motivated me then, that's a similar, is like seeing that we're bringing these folks, we mentor them, we train them up, And I had recently noticed one of these folks that was an intern for me, God, maybe almost 20 years ago, is a VP of marketing at a company now. And so it's watching these other folks progress and these companies progress through my help is really a big piece of it.
Yeah, that's always exciting. I had 18 associates over my career for 46 years, and yeah, I enjoyed seeing them grow and set up their own place and become very successful. And you never know who's going to make it, who's not. It's exciting to see that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
How do you? First of all, let's talk about your product and what do you actually offer to a company as a fractional CEO, CMO?
Yeah, so I mean, try not to. I warned you that I can ramble about these things, but I'd say if I'm to speak as succinctly as possible about what I tend to offer from a CMO perspective, it typically has to do with the go-to-market activities that the company is doing. So there's a little bit of an audit that I take people through, and it's, if you can imagine, it's what are you doing today? You know, what are the marketing activities that you're doing today? What does your lead funnel look like? How are you getting leads today? How are they converting? How are they matriculating through whatever the process is to become an actual paid user? So that's a big piece, and you can understand that that is an interesting Venn diagram of activities that ends up looking like this crazy cluster of grapes, if you will. And so that ends up, in the beginning is we're gonna audit this. It ends up turning into a larger affair where we're trying to determine what fits best for go-to-market for the company based on budget and man capabilities they have, right? And those things. So that's a piece. On the partnership side, that's come up a lot. So a lot of these, especially in any software company, there's this ecosystem of partnership, whether it's technology partners that maybe are they're doing something together with the tech, or they're co-selling, or agency to technology partnerships. And so I'll take a client through a similar sort of audit process of who they partner with. A little bit of reality setting happens sometimes with those. And again, back to the looking at the competition. Oh, the competition is partner with A, B, and C. I should be too. Well, maybe, right? And so sometimes that process is helping those folks realize where they sit in that sort of food chain of partnership, resetting expectations, and then helping them sometimes build out a partnership team that can go and sort of attack that in a way. And definitely what's happened with my practice as well is it's maybe part of why people are saying fractional exec now, and it's really just the same thing of old ways of saying things. But some of these engagements end up turning into mentoring and coaching engagements where I can provide them with sort of let's say a 90-day, maybe there's a project that's 90 days to do some of these audits and set some of these things up, but then they need help. Maybe the CEO doesn't have bandwidth to do this. Maybe the team is young and needs extra support. So it ends up, some of these just inevitably turn into more like coaching and mentoring pieces.
You made a magic word there for me as a dentist. I recognize the word practice, and you said my practice.
Yeah.
And I got a picture that you take on projects to fix something, just like a dentist takes on a project to fix somebody's mouth. They fix it up, and then they're done. You don't need to do anything for the next 20 years if you fix somebody up properly in my business.
Right.
You might maintain them with recall examinations, but you're not really doing anything because they're doing fine. So I understand exactly what you're talking about. I had a picture too when you were talking earlier, what you do when you go into these cluster of grapes you talked about in the Venn diagram. You're like a husky, or maybe a Saint Bernard even, who goes out into the wilderness, goes out into the snowy mountains over in the Alps with a keg around your neck, and you're searching for lost skiers, lost mountain climbers, and you're rescuing people off the side of a mountain because they can't get down.
Yeah, I love that. I love that analogy, and I will say, I've watched this with what I personally went through, and what I was doing in my career through the ramp up to COVID, and that piece, and now what we're in. And beautiful analogy. So many CEOs, whether they want to admit or not, they're a little bit lost. The businesses are, even if they're doing okay, they're a little bit lost. Folks grew, and they grew in spite of lack of having right systems in place. And now they're sitting there saying, how do I get back to this? There was this kind of false plateau that they reached, and they're thinking, how do they get back to that? And you've heard this, being a CEO of these companies, CEOs, and I'm just paraphrasing other people's things. It's a lonely position. You sometimes don't have folks to talk to. CEOs can't be the expert of everything. A lot of times these startups, the CEO can get it to a certain point, but they can't continue at that. And so for a lot of my clients, I'm finding that's the size of, startup or not yet fully matured business I love the St. Bernard analogy. And there's also a part where that I'm a one-man show these days. So I also have to go out in the woods and find those people that are lost. And are they really lost, or are they just hanging out and they'll go find their way down themselves? I do have to, there's the fun piece of that back to me wanting to actually provide value.
What I want to know is what's in the keg?
I was going to ask you. I guess I have to have a couple of different kegs. Sometimes maybe it's coffee, and sometimes it's whiskey.
Kentucky bourbon.
Yeah.
There you go. Hey, does your company have a name and a motto?
Sort of. My company is me. It's Robert Gilbreath. So my website's robertgilbreath.com. A lot of folks will find me and learn a lot about me from LinkedIn. I post a lot. That's sort of where I post my ideas and my questions. I do a lot of things on LinkedIn where I'm sort of like have got something on my mind and I'm going to share it, and I want to get as much input as possible. I'd say my own sort of personal company motto is I'm here to help. Right. And that doesn't mean you have to become a client. Sometimes, frankly, the something that I've learned through the years, if I can help you in a 15-minute phone call or a 30-minute phone call, it's not an assignment that I need to win. Right. I'm just here to help. Right. And so that, I guess if you pin me down to a company motto or a personal motto, it's that.
Do you have any particular client type that you prefer?
Yeah, I'd say today, and a little bit just it has manifested itself from where I was most recently, 10 years plus in e-commerce, SaaS partnerships and marketing. Ideal client today is really someone who's in that ecosystem. So they're building technology, don't really care what part of the technology stack it is, but they're building technology that online retailers and brick and mortar retailers are using. That's sort of my sweet spot, because I can take that direct experience of the last 10 years. Really beyond that, I've got clients that are in fintech, doing finance tech, one's in the construction space. And, there I'm pulling a more holistic viewpoint of my experiences and applying it. And so, yeah.
I could identify with that. Being a coach and consultant to dentists, I know my failures and my successes in the past, and I can relate to dentists pretty well. Anybody who's a dentist who takes on
speed it up.
Yeah. If anybody takes on a coach that's not been a dentist, you're really looking for some major difficulty in navigation when you
right.
The background of a dentist, being a dentist. So I understand what you're talking about. Your sweet spot is the e-commerce space, and particularly those who want more marketing, more market share. How do you crush your competition? What do you do?
I love this question, because back to what I said earlier. I think people worry about competition sometimes in the wrong way. So I don't really have a good answer for this, because I'll say this: I am purposely naive when it comes to my own competition in this space, right? And back to the St. Bernard analogy as well. I do believe that for the type of clients that I'm looking for and the type of beverage that's in my little barrel, if you will, I'm the only one walking around in the woods right now. Right? There might be other dogs with other barrels walking around, but they're not servicing in the way that I do or looking for the kind of clients that I do. So I respectfully declined to answer the direct question because of that.
Yeah, if you're lost in the woods, you don't care what the barrel has got in it. You just want something to help you get out of that place, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about platforms. Do you have any particular ones that you rely on as part of your marketing business, or you're helping people to market?
Yeah, I'll say for my own business, LinkedIn is the tip top of where I'm interacting with, engaging. I think Twitter's probably in the realm as well. And while we could debate if this is an online platform or not, there's so many Slack channels now, and I do recommend to folks, there are different groups that you can join that are on different Slack channels and groups. And I would say that's been a place where when I need to go get advice is cheap to some degrees, but if I have some interesting questions I'm trying to answer, feedback I'm trying to get, I've gotten a lot of value out of using the different Slack channels, communities, if you will, I guess, to use an older nomenclature. Yeah, from a what my clients are using, it's kind of all over the place, right? And there's no silver bullet mix. Back to the Venn diagram of grapes, that could even be used from a marketing mix perspective. And if the person is, let's say they are somewhat of an underdog in the space, that cluster of grapes will likely look a little different than the main competition or the main person that's maybe next in line, above them. So kind of goes all over the place. I would say I'm digitally native from a marketing perspective, but I have become by necessity of what marketing can be and should be, a full repertoire of marketing activities, and then can pick and choose what's right for the client.
Have you had an occasion now to start filling out your Venn diagram with more detail with ChatGPT and other AI programs?
Yeah, it's inevitable, and I'd say I'm cautiously optimistic on what can be done with that. I have some prospective clients right now that are doing some really interesting things. Sort of, ChatGPT by itself isn't going to solve anyone's problems. If you have a good idea, let's talk about search engine optimization, SEO, right? There's best practices there. If we can figure out how to use ChatGPT and AI to do those best practices better, then we're a win. I think someone comes from the other side that's like, oh, I have to do something with AI. I'm not super impressed with it when it's that direction. But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll see some interesting stuff coming out soon.
Yeah, I think when AI is embedded into successful processes, then you're going to win. Laying AI on top of things, maybe not.
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of dad jokes around AI, but mine that I probably should get trademarked is that the best AI is it stands for artificial intelligence, right? But the best AI is going to use actual intelligence, right? So if you can apply the actual intelligence with it, then that's when the real good stuff's going to happen.
I don't have any doubt about that. Tell me, what today are you grateful for, Robert?
Yeah, number one, I'm grateful to have met you online, Dr. Bill, and for you giving me the time to chat. That's number one on my mind. I'm grateful for my family and my supportive spouse and my wonderfully fun kids that I have. I'm grateful to be in a position where I can do what I've always wanted to do, right? And and I'm grateful for my clients that we're having so much fun building things together, and just grateful for the future opportunity that I'm currently sitting
in. I enjoy seeing your pictures your kids painted for you up above.
Hey, you like this?
Yeah, that's wonderful. I know where they came from. My grandkids have the same thing for me, and it's a wonderful thing. How do you start your day? So. You're point in your life where you could be retired. You don't want to stop working. You're doing something you enjoy, giving back. So how do you start every day?
Yeah, I would say at least 4 out of 5 days I'm up before the rest of the family's up. I'm lucky that in my neighborhood there's a small little gym who does these little small classes kind of early in the morning. It works well. I'll admit I feel guilty sometimes, like not being around for the family, and so I'm able to get up, work out, get home. The whole SSS process of shaving and showering and the other S, that all can happen 4 days a week without anybody else in my family being awake, and then I can be present when it's time for kids to go to school and things. So that's typically my start of my day. For better or worse, I've always been an early morning person, and my grandpa, who's actually, hold on, which way I need to point here? That's my grandpa right there. He taught me so much about retail business and interacting with customers, but he always had this saying that if you wait till 6 o'clock to wake up, you've already wasted half the morning. And his point was mathematically correct, but a little bit ridiculous. He never followed up with the fact that he went to bed at, like, when he got older in life, he went to bed at like 8 o'clock. So of course he was waking up at 4 every morning to do stuff. But yeah, no, it's like, I try to get in those workouts. It helps, staying healthy, but also feels good to get moving early in the morning.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do now is I found an accountability partner that I can get out and walk in the morning with, and so we go out and we hold each other pretty accountable to, show up at 6:45, walk for 3 miles before we get back home at 8 o'clock. And
that's perfect.
It's a good way to start a day, is to do something that's going to be positive rather than just sleeping late or getting on your social media and doing nothing else.
100%.
What about your
100%.
advice? I look at successful people and I go, they probably weren't successful when they were 20. Many people learn through the school of hard knocks. And what would you give your advice to yourself if you had to look back and do it over again?
I warned you that we would talk about patience, and I would say if I could go back and whisper in my own ear, 20-year-old me, is to be patient, to take stuff in, like understand there's a process to things. I think at that age too, we didn't talk a lot about mentorship, from our own selves, but I think I was very sure of myself back then, and I was also very impatient. And I think if I would have known to go find people to talk to, right, and people that I could confide in, they wouldn't be judgmental. If I would have known to do that back then. I say these kind of questions are always interesting, because I'm very happy at where I was, where I am today, and I do like that I have the spaghetti bowl of career path. So there's a little bit of with the grain of salt there. There's some things I wish I could have told myself, or wish I could tell myself back then, but not to the point of it would change what my outcome is today, if that makes sense. It's almost like if I was a time traveler going back to whisper in my ear, it would be almost inconsequential advice, but it might have helped some things throughout the years, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you mentioned mentor, and that was a big part of my growth. I took mentors on continually all through my years, and still continue to have mentors, even at my age of 73. You never, ever reach the point where you can't find somebody who can teach you something. As part of the Influencer Podcast, joy for me is I get to talk to people who I would consider mini mentors on a weekly basis, people that throw advice into my life. So who's your current mentor? Who are you following?
I have this, today I'll admit I don't have one single mentor that's like my go-to person. I've got an interesting patchwork quilt of folks that, whether it's Russ, who's a more senior marketing person that I've met through the years here, or Chad, who runs a web development agency out of Seattle. I've got folks that I can go lean on if I need feedback. There's Josh here in town, who I'd consider one of these folks who owns an ad agency, and he's someone that there's no BS when I talk to him, and I can confide in him. There's no worries of, is he going to blab to somebody else about me? Is he going to give me, he's somebody that we can argue about something in a good way, right? And so, today that's where I am. I did have I went back to grad school kind of later in life, and through that process, the school I was at would invite local executives in, and they invited this gentleman, Tony Bidet, who was the he was at the time the CEO of a credit union that's based in Austin, but is now a national credit union. He came in and spoke, and some of the things he said, really hit home. And I'll say, when I talk about patience, I warned you I would say that a lot. He mentored me while I was in grad school, because I was in a state in my life where I had built a team at a company. I had been going to grad school, and I was sort of impatient with what was going to happen next. And I was getting antsy about it. And he took me under his wing, and I think that was a pivotal point in my career trajectory and even my career life, if you will, because he was very focused on like, things take time. This is someone who had built his career through the banking industry, and like very, the legal situations going on there. You can't be rash and too fast with things, because you have to understand how it's going to impact and all the legal ramifications. So yeah, that he made a big impact. And I said, since then it's been this interesting sort of ragtag group of folks that, helped me in different ways.
Well, you did mention the magic word again, impact. So I was kind of thinking, in your life, why is it important for you to be impactful?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I want to provide value for folks. I don't even know. Maybe you can help me articulate this, but it's like, if I'm not providing, value to the group that I'm working with, if I'm not seeing my impact and seeing things move forward, I don't feel fulfilled. And so, I don't know if it's like a over zealous honesty that's brewing. I mean, I think I've been around enough folks. My parents were small business owners, and I watched them do good by their customers, right? Sometimes losing business because they were, overly honest about things, but they could always sleep at night, right? And so I think for me, that's a big part of it. Is it's like, I want to make an impact. I want to be helpful. And so I can't imagine not being in that world. And, we've seen it. There are coaches and consultants and talking heads all over the internet that it's obvious that they're not providing impact. They're selling you on watch the next video or buy the next thing, and then the next thing. They're not making any impact. It's like, it's ether, right? And so I don't want to be in that world with what I'm doing at all.
Along the way, I agree with you totally. I read a book by Bob Buford called Halftime, where, and I had already done what he wrote in the book about. It was kind of like I was reading my history when I was reading his book. The first half of your life, you live for yourself, doing it your way, trying to become somebody. Second half, you have an epiphany at halftime, and you say, okay, I want to do something, for humanity, to honor God, to do the things that are right for the world. And you kind of leave your self-focus and go to others' focus. And that book with Halftime was pretty significant for me, because I'd already passed through that zone of halftime. And then he wrote a follow-up book that I read a year or two later that said, From Success to Significance. And so it was basically taking the halftime second half and saying there's another part after the game's over, after you've had your career. You're now a fractional executive. You're now moving into significance. You're doing something for people that can have a lasting legacy. And so I can see that you're now into the level of significance, giving back to people. So that's how I would verbalize it. If you ask me what you're doing, the impact part is you've reached that third level.
That's the goal. I think there's always a stride to that, right? That keeps me going in and of itself.
What do you want to be remembered for when it's all said and done?
Back to that mantra of here to help. I want to be remembered that I was helpful, that I was someone that people could trust, they could rely on. That I was a good parent, good family person. And then back to like what we just said, people acknowledge my impact. Right. And it's not about like a plaque on a wall or anything, but even mentioning earlier, like interns that I had through the past, that I'm so proud of their careers now, whether they think about, whether they acknowledge or they think about it or they thank me, I know that I've helped them. and I've known them helping these companies and these people, and that's some, even if it's in the back of their mind, just that through the years is what's the what I'm hoping that I'm remembered for.
Absolutely. Well, help us remember how to reach you. How do we connect?
Yeah, super easy. So yeah, my website's robertgilbreath.com, and I warn you, it's a one-page brochure because it's not about me and my website. It's about my clients. But yeah, robertgilbreath.com. There's links to my LinkedIn. I'm an open networker on LinkedIn, and again, here to help. So feel free to find me on LinkedIn and connect. And that's really how I'd say that's probably the quickest way to support right now.
LinkedIn's always it. You can find Robert Gilbreath right there. How would you say your experience was on the Influencer podcast today?
This has been great, Dr. Bill. Yeah, like I said in the beginning, really thankful for you having me on. I appreciate what you're doing with this, sharing people's stories like this. I know personally helpful for me. We didn't even talk about that, but where we get sources of inspiration, whether it's books that we read, like you mentioned Bob's book, or other people's vlogs and podcasts. So I really appreciate you having me on. It's been fun. Obviously I like to gab a little bit, so. Appreciate you letting me.
I've enjoyed having you on too. So, not the last time we'll hear, but today I want to give you the final word for talking to our audience. Then I'll come back after I give you. So you can go ahead and talk to our audience and give them the final word.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. So I would say, kind of on the theme of every talk about, don't be afraid to ask for help, right? Whether it's your boss, if you're in a situation where maybe you are an executive at a company, ask for help. It doesn't mean you're failing. It doesn't mean that something is necessarily wrong, but get help, get advice, get folks in your network that you can interact with, right? Whether it's some kind of group that's put together that's more formal, or if it's just informal, like I would say, like my network, my mentoring ring, if you will, is. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help.
And that's the final word. You've got the picture of the grandfather, the mentor of mentors. You've got the grandchildren. That's your motivation for keeping going, the legacy you're going to leave. So I understand exactly where you're going. I want to help build a legacy among all of the people that are watching today, and that's helping you capture freedom. If you'll capture that QR code, it'll lead you straight to my digital business card, where I share all the rest of what? I share the rest of our Influencer podcast, of course. You can find my website, drbillwilliams.tv, where all the podcasts are stored and other information about books I've written and things I've done. Now, one thing I wanted to mention as we close off the show today is we do a lot with AI technology, and we infuse our technology with AI, artificial intelligence, to help businesses be more efficient. And so one thing that struck me when we were talking earlier was you're interested in how can a company do, I read some of your crowdfunding articles versus traditional financing. And so I just wanted to finish up our conversation with that. What if you could crowdfund at no cost? A lot of companies charge money to crowdfund. They'll take 5%, 10%, 2%, some number. What if you could connect with somebody and they wouldn't take any percent? Would that be useful? So one of the things that we do as a company is we give away a crowdfunding mechanism called OBless. And we allow people to market their project, their innovation startup, their charity, their church, their nonprofit. Market it for free. Build a story for free, put up the information, share it to the world, collect the money, and get the money from sources for free. And we don't charge for the service too. So that's kind of our give back to the world. Cool. So I think that would be something that I wanted to leave with your audience. If you've got friends that are watching this, there's ways to do things in the world that are going to make a significance. You're giving back. And so that's kind of like the third level we were talking about, Robert.
Yeah.
If you find success, then you can start helping other people be more successful. And with that, I thought I would just say, check out any of these URLs that we've shared, and it'll lead you to the same place. And that's back to me, back to my company, back to what we do for our daily bread. So, Robert, thank you for being part of the Influencer Podcast. It's fun. I hope we do it again sometime.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bill. Really appreciate the time today.
You're welcome. You guys take care. We'll be back with another episode shortly. It's Dr. Bill Williams on today's Influencer Podcast. Take care.